Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Pigskin Addicts back again with another video. So I want to jump in to a season review of some sort, right? I am going to kind of go down the list, coaches, players. I'm obviously not going to cover every player. I don't have the time to do that, but some of the major players that have made an impact this season, right, good or bad, I'm going to go over it, and I'm going to give them a grade, right? Now, this is completely my opinion. This obviously can be argued, right, as much as you want to. If there's anything you disagree with, obviously, right, feel free to let me know in the comments. But this is just my takeaway from it. I thought that this could be a very fun, entertaining, but also something to look back at, right? If as we go into the 2023 season, last season, if you weren't following me last season, last offseason, I covered a lot of what the Chargers did. Obviously, I had a lot of optimism, and some of that has went down, but I'm still optimistic with the future. So I'm gonna go over these grades for this past season and kind of get into what I think, the person, the player, the coach, what they have to do to improve going forward in the 2023 season. So number one, obviously, I'm starting with the head coach, Brandon Staley. And to me, Brandon Staley got a C- this year. Some people might agree with that. Some people might not, right? It might be high, it might be low for some people. But for me, I think a C- is fair. Number one, right? You have to acknowledge the improvement in win-loss record, right, that the Chargers had. There's a lot of things that I can get into regarding Brandon Staley, his coaching decisions, all this stuff, right? But you have to acknowledge the Chargers, they got a game better, right? And that's what you want to do. You want to improve year in and year out. That is the goal. So you cannot just spit at that. You can't ignore it. The Chargers had one more win in 2022 than they did in 2021, right? So obviously, it is a step in the right direction. Now, the way that it got there was, not the best, right? It wasn't the most alluring, right? There wasn't any style points, but the NFL is not about style points, right? This is a result-oriented business. I've said it before when it comes to Brandon Staley and him not winning. So I can't talk out of both sides of my mouth and say, him improving from 2021 to 2022 as far as win-loss record. I can't say it doesn't matter because I say all the time that this is a result-oriented business. The Chargers, they got the 10 wins. They clinched the playoff berth, first one in 4 years. So you have to give him credit for that. Now, the other thing that I give Brandon Staley credit for is keeping this team together when all of the injuries happened. 2022 was a bad year as far as injuries, right, for the Chargers, and that's something that you have to acknowledge, but it can't be an excuse, right? This is the NFL. Injuries happen all the time. You have to try to address those as best as you can, right? That's why you need a deep roster. That's why you need to hit on draft picks. That's why you need to hit in free agency. That's why you need to hit, right? You cannot, just depend on one guy, two guys, whatever, right? You have to be able to have a good roster, right? 1 to 53. And you need to sign guys, right? Guys who are going to be backups or even special teams guys. You have to sign them with the thought that they might be on the field at some point, right? You have to sign them with that thought. Do you trust these guys on the field actually playing, right, on either offense or defense? Do you trust these guys? That's what has to be discussed when you're signing free agents, right? You can't just put anybody out there, right? You can't just have bodies out there. There's only 53 roster spots. I think you can only dress, 46 players on game day. So every single roster spot has to be of value, right? You have to plug a guy in who can give you some value somewhere. And that is an important thing for any team who wants to compete, right? We just seen Kansas City. They don't have the most talented roster. They are top heavy. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, right? They're top heavy, their offensive line. But as you look down their roster, right, they have a lot of guys who are kind of no names, right? They're not household names, but they contribute. They contribute on special teams, defense, right? They do the little things, and I think that's what the Chargers need, right? You cannot really depend on being too top heavy. You kind of have to balance this roster out a little bit more. So I think that's something that they have to look at going forward. I think Brandon Staley has to push for that, him being the head coach. He's got to push for that going forward. But this was a very injury riddled season, and you got to give Brandon Staley credit, right? He navigated this as best as you probably possibly can, right? Outside of the weird stuff when it comes to the injuries, right? And not telling the truth, at the podium and stuff like that. And even that, that could be just a lot of gamesmanship, right? So I'm not going to, take too much away from that. But he did navigate this team through injury. They stayed together and, they were able to get to 10 wins. So that's something that you do have to give him credit for. Now, to get into the negative section of this, right? Obviously, Brandon Staley was hired by the Chargers as a sort of defensive guru. Right now, I'm sure he didn't call himself that, but he was labeled that and he didn't shy away from it. So when you have a guy who is labeled a defensive guru and who gets so much credit for what he does defensively, right? This defense was still poor. This was a very, very porous defense. This was a bottom 8 defense in the league this past year. The run game was obviously, run defense was obviously terrible. It was one of the worst of all time, right? As far as yards per carry go, it just wasn't good. This defense wasn't good, and considering that the Chargers spent $200 million in free agency last offseason, right, most of it being spent on defense, you got to look and say, is this the right guy leading us on defense, right? So, I mean, as much as you want to give him credit for improving, the win-loss record improved. The defense itself did not improve, and to me, that is obviously a very, very big red flag. I think Brandon Staley's lucky to still have his job right now, to be honest with you, but that's something that has to get fixed in 2023 going forward, right? This defense has to improve. Now, it doesn't need to go near the top of the league. It doesn't have to be at the top of the league. There are certain standings, right? There are certain things that you should, try to be top 10 in, right? Third down percentage and things like that. But overall, this defense doesn't need to be a shutdown defense, right? This defense needs to be able to get pressure on quarterbacks on third down, right? They got to be able to stop the run better, right? And overall, they have to make it harder on opponents, right? They have to make it harder on quarterbacks. They have to make it harder on offensive coordinators. They have to make it harder on other teams. It's too easy, right? Even when you watch the game, you can look at stats all you want to, but the eye test tells you that sometimes this is too easy for other teams. And, when you're looking at a team that is great on defense, it doesn't look easy for other teams. And that's one of the benchmarks that I'm looking forward to in 2023, right? Watching the Charger defense, how much pressure do they put on other offenses, right? Do offenses struggle against this defense, right? Do good offenses struggle against this defense? That's something that I want to see, right? I want to see good offenses struggle against a defense. If they're able to do that, then I think they're going to be fine going forward. But this is a big question mark, right? Nobody can say that this is going to happen with any kind of certainty. So again, this is a question mark going forward, and this is on Brandon Staley. Now, one of the things I think Brandon Staley is at fault for is the defensive scheme. This Vic Fangio defensive scheme, it's taken the league by storm. There are a lot of teams that run this particular defensive scheme. This scheme has been credited as the best modern scheme to run against, modern offenses, right? Passing offenses, normally two high safeties, right? And being able to switch up coverages, being able to give different looks up front, right? Being able to do a lot of different things, right? You have a player like Derwin James moving him around, doing all of that type of stuff. That's what this defense is supposed to be. But there are holes, right? Big holes in this defense. This defense gets torched too much, right? They get torched deep too much, intermediate, right? Obviously, the run game is an issue. I just went over that. This defense has holes. So is it the scheme, right? Is this scheme not being taught correctly? Is there something missing? Again, these are all valid, legitimate questions that you can ask at this point, right? They have no answers, right? There's no answers. No answers until, 7 months from now when the Chargers are actually playing regular season football. You cannot answer that with certainty. This is a scheme that has been exposed pretty much for the past couple of seasons, right? 34 regular season games, and this defense hasn't been good. They have not been able to consistently stop anybody. So, to me, asking if this is the wrong scheme is a legitimate question at this point. There's going to have to be some big adjustments going forward, right? It just needs to be, right? This has been 2 years of a bad defense. I don't know if they have to, focus a little more on the run game, right? Stopping the run game, right? Maybe they get something there, right? Maybe they become a heavy blitzing team. There has to be some type of adjustment made, right? You cannot come into 2023 doing the same things that you've done the past 2 seasons that haven't worked. It just doesn't work that way, right? You're going to fail doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. So to me, I'm asking, is this the right scheme for this team? And, as much money as they spent last season, it's going to have to be the right scheme for this team, or else Brandon Staley's going to be gone, right? It's just that simple. So it's a legitimate question. Is this the right scheme that the Chargers are playing right now on defense? Now, one other thing before I close this out. Brandon Staley is responsible for the offense, ultimately. He's responsible for the offense. Now, just because he is a defensive coach does not mean that he is not responsible for the offense. When you have that HC, when you are the head coach, you are responsible for all facets of the ball, right? Now, obviously, you hire offensive coordinators, and it is their job, to get the offense running as best as they can, but ultimately it is the head coach who oversees everything. So all of the struggles on offense this past season, it's on Brandon Staley. It is on Brandon Staley. Joe Lombardi had some really, really bad outings as an offensive coordinator, and that was allowed to happen because of Brandon Staley. Now, there were times where I questioned whether Brandon Staley was getting involved in the offense because, we started to get down the stretch run, the offense started to look a little different. There was a little bit more, of an aggressive mindset going downfield a little bit, intermediate and downfield stuff. I question whether Brandon Staley got involved with game planning. I think that he did. There's no confirmation to that. I haven't seen anything or read anything as of yet, but it seems to me that he did, right? Now, was that too little too late? I think that it was. I think Brandon Staley should have been involved in offensive game planning earlier, much earlier in the season, right? Week 5, week 6, hell, even after the bye, right? When Mike Williams went down, when Keenan Allen wasn't back, I thought he should have been more involved, and I thought he should have taken the reins and made this offense more aggressive, right? More of a running offense and really, really focus on that. But they didn't do that. They continued to throw the ball, 45, 50 times a game with Justin Herbert having, the rib cartilage injury that he did. It just wasn't a good look, and ultimately the offense suffered because of it, and ultimately it falls on Brandon Staley's shoulders because he is the head coach. So he let that happen. You have to put it on him, right? The buck stops with him. He is the head man, so if anything like that happens, right, it's always the head coach who is going to bear the brunt of it. Now, obviously, Joe Lombardi is not in town anymore. Kellen Moore is the new offensive coordinator. But, again, Brandon Staley, he bears the brunt of all things that happen on the field. He is the head coach. So when he sees some stuff happening that shouldn't be happening, right, he's got to speak up and he's got to say something, right? He's got to use his authority. He is in charge. He is the leader of this team. He is the head coach. So I got to put that on him. I do, right? Whether you think it's fair or not, I got to put it on him. He is the head coach, and, you can't let stuff like that happen, right? If you want to be taken seriously, if you want to compete at a high level, if you want to be able to compete with the Mahomeses, with the Josh Allens, with the Joe Burrows, your offense has to be able to keep pace. And if you're not keeping pace, right, with a very, very bad defense, right, bottom 8 defense, you're really just doing nothing, right? And, the Chargers were blessed to get a playoff spot, having a bad defense and having an offense that was very stagnant at times. So, all in all, I think Brandon Staley, he deserves a C minus. Again, this is not as high or low maybe as you guys might want it, but to me, I think it's a fair process, right? There was some good stuff. There was also some bad stuff, but, ultimately, the way things culminated this season, right, with the blown 27-point lead, there's a lot of pressure on Brandon Staley's shoulders. So in 2023, right, it's going to be win or go home for him. And honestly, I think this is where, If he has any greatness in him, I think it's going to come out. If he doesn't have greatness in him, and if the moment is too big, and if he shows that this job is a little bit too much for him, it's going to come out, right? And I don't think we're going to have to wait very long to see it. The Chargers, just based off of 2022, the schedule in 2023 is a lot more tougher. There are some good offenses on that schedule, so I expect the Chargers to really show who they are going to be very, very early in the season, right? You can probably look at the first, quadrant of games, right? The first 4 games, after the first 4 games, you'll be able to determine how this team is going to respond, right? What they have, right? What they're made of, and, ultimately if they're going to be a competitor in the AFC. So they have a lot to work on. Again, Brandon Staley, good things, some bad things. Overall, I think a C-. I think is pretty fair. So that's just my assessment of Brandon Staley's 2022 season. Hopefully we see some more good stuff in 2023. Hopefully it's all good stuff in 2023. But only time will tell. There's still many months to go before the season gets kicked off. But that is all I got for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. Shout out to my new subscribers. I appreciate you guys. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing down below. And don't forget to smash that like button on your way out as well, too. I'll be back again tomorrow with more content. And until next time.